Good afternoon and welcome. I'm John Goodman, President of Town Hall Los Angeles, and delighted to invite you to participate and enjoy our program in partnership with PPIC, the Public Policy Institute of California, and we are delighted today to have as our speaker the senior senator from California, Dianne Feinstein. Now, those of you familiar with Town Hall know that you'll have to put up with a little housekeeping. And those of you not familiar with Town Hall, I always wonder why not, but that's another subject. We're delighted today to welcome Senator Feinstein for the 7th time to the Town Hall podium, and to remind all of you here that this is part of our ongoing programs, and so a little bit of housekeeping, if I may. On November 1st, we welcome the new CEO of the Getty Trust, Dr. James Cuno, and as you all know, he is new to Los Angeles, so I hope you will join us for a breakfast to meet Dr. Cuno at this wonderful time. He's new to the organization, which is both a local and a national treasure, the Getty Trust. And then on Wednesday, November 9th, we welcome back to Los Angeles Liam McGee, who is the chairman, president, and CEO of the Hartford, but so many of us remember him from his time when he was head of Bank of America in Los Angeles, and we're really delighted to see him again. And then on November 16th for a late afternoon evening program, please join us to listen to and meet with Janet Robinson, the CEO and president of the New York Times Corporation, who's going to be speaking to us about something we probably know a little better than almost anybody in the country, and that is the state of today's journalism and how you reinvent yourself. And then on Thursday, December 8th, just in time for a cheerful holiday season program, we're joining with the RAND for a program on palliative care. We want you to feel really good as we enter the new year. Now also, those of you familiar with our programs know that we have very special guests here today from the American Heritage Program. Our students today are from the Academy of Business Leadership, Belmont High School, Crenshaw Gifted Magnet, LA Job Corps, North Hollywood High School, Ramona High School, and Youth Opportunities Unlimited Alternative High School. And we thank City National Bank and PPIC for hosting them here today. Thanks for coming. For 75 years, we have been doing programs here in the Biltmore. As a matter of fact, our first programs in 1937 were held here. So this podium is very, very special to all of us. And to introduce today's program, also someone who is very special to all of us, I would like to introduce, before I do that, I gotta tell you the thing I forgot. Turn off your cell phones, please. It's really important. Turn them off. Now, also, those of you not familiar with Town Hall, I've wasted just about as much time as I'm allowed before I get shot from the back of the room. So we don't do elaborate introductions of anything. On your table, you will find biographies, descriptions, and backgrounders, and I encourage you not only to read them, take them with you, cherish them. And so now I would like to introduce somebody who's well known to all of us, and both a board member of Town Hall Los Angeles and PPIC, Bob Hertzberg, Mayor Brown.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. This is very important for a number of reasons. You know, we all in this democracy have an obligation to participate, and It's great that you take time out from your day to be here, so I just want to thank you, and so many friends. Felicia who's here, and Brigitte, board members from both groups, Ron Gastelum and Jeff Keitlinger. It's wonderful. I just want to thank you very, very much, and I want to thank John. Really do a magnificent job for Town Hall. It is wonderful to be both on your board and on what we call the Prince of Public Policy, Mark Baldessari's board, who is just an unbelievable talent in providing reliable data for us and throughout as policymakers that I used to be in California, and so much just an honest broker of information and both the public perception through his polls at the PPIC and the stellar work of the PPIC. You know, as I sat down to think a little bit about this introduction for Senator Feinstein, I wanted to step back for a moment and look at the orders of magnitude, if you will, of who she represents. There are 53 members of Congress that are part of California that are senator for 20 years. They report basically and work with her through both houses. And I sat and I looked up on Google this morning a map. And I started counting how many states it took going from the West Coast to the East Coast to get to 53 members of Congress. Washington, Oregon, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Kansas. It takes you to the Mississippi River to get to 53 members of Congress. So if you just think about the number of folks and the size of the economy for which Dianne Feinstein is responsible, it is nothing less than extraordinary. And that is couched, I think, and I share this on a personal level. I was a student in law school in San Francisco when the horrible tragedy happened some many years ago with Mayor Moscone and Harvey Milk. And I got to be, as a young political kid, to watch this new person who was the supervisor and the chair of the Board of Supervisors take charge of a city, Comet, and watch it happen. And I got, as someone in government who's a real policy wonk, to watch somebody who doesn't take on all the flashy issues, but the kinds of stuff that makes government work, the kinds of stuff that people have confidence in. Ask Mr. Keitlinger what leadership that Senator Feinstein has on water issues, stuff that doesn't make the front page of the newspaper. But when I was working on the quantification settlement agreement, it was Senator Feinstein who was engaged. It was Senator Feinstein who, listen to this story. It's 5 o'clock in the morning in Washington, D.C. It's 2 o'clock in the morning in Sacramento, and we have a critical vote, and we needed Senator Feinstein to help influence a member. And we picked up the phone, and we called Senator Feinstein, and we woke her up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Without a blink of an eye, she got on the telephone, she took care of it, she closed the deal, and made it happen. It is an extraordinary commitment to public service. And I, quite frankly, if I can speak candidly among so many of my friends here, am just damn sick and tired of all the rat-fink politicians who get out there with their 3x5 cards and read these things and read the polls and try to get out there to get to their next job and don't do the heavy lifting. Dianne Feinstein is the senior senator, not just by virtue of years, but by virtue of being the adult in the room, and has so many times on so many issues that have never made the newspapers, been there to solve problems, fix problems, been a resource, beat up often people who are our own friends because they're moving in the wrong direction, exercising political and statesmanship in a way that I have never seen. I am a gigantic fan of her. It is going to be a great day today as Mr. Baldessari comes up with Senator Feinstein and engages her. You all see the depth and range of her dynamic skill set and her unbelievable problem-solving skills. I am a great fan. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Dianne Feinstein and Mark Baldessari.
All right, here we go. And Senator Feinstein, it's wonderful to have you here today. I'm sure that everyone in our audience feels that way, but I especially feel that way because just a month ago I was sitting in your office in Washington. I was carefully prepared by my staff to deliver a letter to your chief of staff that would invite you to come and speak on December 13th, and the highs and lows of my job. The low was, he said, no way, December 13th. But quickly he said, but you know, October, it could happen. And that's the hope I brought with me, and here we are today, and it's fantastic. Senator Feinstein, you follow the polls, I'm sure, as I do. You know that a poll just came out yesterday from the CBS and New York Times indicating that the Congress had a 9% approval rating, which was very low. But I'm here to tell you that, in California, our latest poll had you at 48%, which was, among the highest that we saw of anybody in California in this difficult economic climate that we have today. So Californians understand that your work and how you're representing them, they separate that from what they see and are disappointed in Congress. And we'll get to that a little bit later in our discussion. But our polls have indicated for several years now that the economy is the most troubling issue for Californians. 67% said that the economy was the most important problem. 65% said that they expected bad economic times to continue in the U.S. and in California. Although they don't want them, that's what they're expecting now. And I wanted to ask you, you've certainly closely observing what's going on in Washington now. The president came out with a very detailed jobs plan. Are there parts of that plan that you think would be particularly meaningful for jobs in the economy at this time? And does any of it have a hope of seeing the light of day?
Well, thank you very much, Mark. And ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be here. It's great to be in this beautiful room and with this organization. So I'm just going to relax and tell you what I think.
Good.
On jobs, can we compromise and can we get a bill? Yes. Will we? Likely not. And let me tell you why. I've served 18 years on the judiciary. I've had ample opportunity to study the Constitution and all documents related to the growth of the United States of America. And I have come to the conclusion that we have the best form of democracy that I know of in the world. That's the plus. Here's the minus. If you elect people that want to solve problems and want to work to the middle of the political spectrum, you can get something done, because most of America is in the center of the political spectrum. If you elect people who are outliers, who are on the far right or the far left, who pound the table and will not compromise, you cannot get anything done. And that's what I believe is characterizing the gridlock that's in Washington. People will not compromise. Having said that, the president put forward a jobs bill. It did not get cloture in the Senate. The president took a part of the jobs bill. That funded first responders, police and fire. We've lost 80,000 teachers in this state. It funded teachers. It meant $3.6 billion for California alone in terms of these improvements. We voted on it last week. It went down. It did not get 60 votes. And this next week, we will vote on another part of the president's job program, and that's the part that has an infrastructure bank and monies for repairs of bridges and highways and things that really need to get done in the United States of America. And absent a miracle, it will not have 60 votes for cloture. Now, you may say, why? And I'll tell you why. Because that is funded by the vote we take next week by 0.7% surcharge on those who make $1 million a year or more. And the Republicans will not vote for it. And I think people in this room really have to understand that in this economy, the people that have done well is the 1% at the top. And the people that have not done well is the lowest fifth of American workers and slightly on up above that. And that's a real struggle, because they don't earn the real dollars to keep up even if they are employed. And so it's a very difficult time in our economy. And these infrastructure bills, these jobs bills, really would make a difference and really would help. I came to the Senate when cloture, which means you close off debate, and a majority is 51. To get cloture, it takes 60. Cloture was never used to stop a bill going to the floor, and it was rarely used to prevent a vote on a bill. Now, every single vote that has a comprehensive plan that may be somewhat controversial has to go through cloture. So what has happened, and I'm sorry to say this, but it's true, the Republicans have changed a majority in the Senate, a majority vote, to a supermajority vote. So you have to have that 60 votes for virtually everything that gets passed. I think it's a mistake. I think they have overused it, and it's certainly used to prevent passage of these bills.
So in this current environment, politically in Washington and economically in California, we've been facing double-digit unemployment for a considerable amount of time now. People are becoming frustrated, hopeless about the job situation. What do you think the federal government or Washington might be able to do to help create jobs and improve the economy in California?
Okay, let me respond to that. America is basically a private enterprise economy. You have government. Government's main job is to fund governmental entities, not to fund the big companies that hire the majority of workers in this country. And that's a fact. Many people think, well, it's small business. The Treasurer's report that just came out shows that the overwhelming number of Americans are hired by big companies. So there are two things. One is monetary policy, which the Federal Reserve uses, and the other is fiscal policy, which you use to prime the pump. That's what the jobs bill is. And if you can't get it through, it's a problem. And that's where we are today. There actually have been 5 measures designed to improve the economy. And so far, 4 of them have gone down. And we have the last one we'll vote on next week. I do think this. The study that Steve Levy does at UCLA on the continuing study of the economy shows that California has gained 250,000 jobs. I think that's good news. That's the beginning, perhaps, of a turnaround. If you look at other figures, you will see that the third quarter of this year, in terms of housing foreclosures, is 15% lower than the third quarter of last year. That's another good indicator. But what we've had is, from 2008, where I heard Henry Paulson, Secretary of the Treasury, say on the telephone with 40 United States senators that we could be facing a total collapse of the American economy, something worse than the Great Depression. And that led to the Troubled Assets Relief Program known as TARP. Well, also were all these subprime loans. And those subprime loans were sliced and diced and securitized and put out in all kinds of debt interest instruments all over the world. And one of the rating houses even rated them AAA, of all things. Consequently, when things began to go sour and the housing bubble broke, which it did, the whole construction part of business came in because so many houses were underwater and vacant that the construction of homes in California really just stopped. And that's kind of where we are with some counties just inundated with homes that are underwater. I feel very strongly that one of the things we have to do, and Thursday we had Ben Bernanke come in from the Federal Reserve, and some of us had a discussion, and the president, I guess yesterday, announced a program which would be helpful to those homes that were supported by Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. I don't think that's enough. I think there needs to be a program that will take these mortgages, dependent upon what level you want to go to, but take them all down to 4%. And either by giving an additional equity to a bank, or in some way allowing the individual to remain in the home, provided they have a job and can pay a 4% loan. But you went through a period where you had first, seconds, adjusted rate mortgages, fees, points, and we had a whole host of people call our office saying they didn't know when they bought their house, when the mortgage readjusted to go dramatically up in interest, what would happen. And now, ignorance, I understand, is no excuse, but anybody in this audience that's ever bought a house knows loan documents are like this, and it's very difficult to understand them all. So that's part of the picture, and we need to figure a way to be able to negotiate these loans. My view is we bailed out the banks when the banks needed help. Now the banks have to help the people, and this is the biggest way they can do that.
Well, that certainly hit a chord with our audience here in Los Angeles. Foreclosures and housing, mortgages, it's been a big issue in California. We've seen in our polling, very worrisome to a lot of people who are homeowners and just very troubling. What do you make of the Occupy movement? What's the economic significance? What's the political meaning? Where does it go from here? It's a question, you know, that we all have right now about we're watching this movement, but we don't really know what it all means or where it's going.
I think it took a note from the Arab Spring, and particularly from Cairo, where hundreds of thousands of people went down, lived in the square, stopped business in Cairo with one motivation, and that was to take down the regime of Hosni Mubarak. I think it's also in response to the Tea Party that's had groups, not sitting in like that, but groups coming together and expressing themselves. I think, and I understand the frustration. There's so much frustration out there, but there are all kinds of different agendas going on. So it's very hard to support or to think out, other than frustration, what people really want out of this kind of activity. I think most of us know what's wrong, but what most of us don't know is what to do about it. And what to do about it is to convince members, oh, there's a chance coming up next week with, you know, a bill for major reconstruction of bridges that are falling down, highways that are decrepit, setting up a permanent infrastructure bank to make this nation competitive and to fund it with 0.7% surcharge on millionaires. And I don't know a single millionaire who minds that or who says, don't do it to me. It needs help. And you got to call Republicans, and Republicans in the Senate, Republicans in the House, and say, look, this is just one part of the jobs bill. It would help. We want you to vote for it. So the problem that I have is that the effort in the streets isn't specific to what will solve the problem.
And what will solve the problem?
Well, what will solve the problem is being able to become competitive again. And that takes a number of different things. And it's very difficult because we have a big debt. And we haven't gotten into that, but that's a very real worry.
Let's get into that.
Let's get into that?
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into that, all right?
Yeah. The debt.
The debt, okay.
Because at the same time, we're trying to prime the pump, and we're not unique in this situation. It's something that Europe's facing, and you know, is that we've got to be very mindful of this this very big debt we have, and there's a debt reduction effort underway. The states are worried. California's worried. What's this going to mean for us? So.
Well, that's right. And let me give you what I know about the history of this debt. Point number one, America has always funded wars. World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, with a military tax, and that's what's paid for those wars. The Bush administration elected not to do that, and Iraq was put on the deficit, and that's nearly $1 trillion. And Afghanistan was being run off of the deficit as well. Obama, much to his credit, has changed that and put Afghanistan now within the budget. And at the same time, there was a tax cut. So here's where we are in America. Over the past 10 years, we've gained 9.1% in population. Our military budget has gone up 74%. Entitlements, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, veterans benefits, have gone up 32%. Domestic spending has remained flat, and taxes have gone down 18%. Now, those are figures directly out of the Senate Appropriations Committee. I believe them to be correct. So that is a problem that we have. Taxes are lower. You have huge expenses for defense that are way up, and expenses for entitlements that are way up. And we are flat on things like the Department of Homeland Security, agriculture, the Justice Department, Education Department, whatever you name it, all the domestic programs are essentially flat. Well, some have taken the view that doesn't matter, we still want to cut them more. And so there was a Budget Control Act to get the debt limit raised, and there is a super committee, and it's made up of 12 people, 6 from the House, 6 from the Senate, 3 in each from each party, and they are charged to produce a plan by November 23rd, and it would come to the floor of the Senate, and we would have to pass that plan by December 23rd, or a process known as sequestration would come into play, and they're supposed to cut $1.2 trillion. We have already cut over $900 billion, so they cut an additional $1.2 trillion to get us to $2 trillion in cuts over 10 years. Absent that, sequestration, automatic cuts begin at the end of next year, 2012. And that's very difficult, because if you look at it, 74% increase in defense, you got to take 50, and the agreement was to take 50% of the cuts out of defense. And now you're seeing members of the committee saying, no, we don't want to do that. But they had agreed to it to get this measure passed in the first place. So absent an agreement, my big concern is that our bond ratings fall, because there cannot be a political coming together to solve the problem. Now, the problem is serious, and we all have to put aside a lot of ideology to do what is pragmatic and prudent that solves it for the time being. That is the most important thing we can do. There is a group called the Group of Six, and the Group of Six has circulated a statement, which I have signed on to, saying that they would actually also support additional revenues and urging bigger cuts. The Nonpartisan Budget Committee says essentially we need about $4 trillion in cuts to take us to 60% of GDP within the next 10 years. I would also like to see included in this, candidly, and is tax reform. And I think if I could just spell out for a moment quickly.
I was going to ask you about tax reform, so this would actually be a good time to hear what your thoughts are about tax reform, because there's a lot of talk about tax reform in California. Bob Hertzberg's been involved in it, and trying to put together some different ways of raising revenues given how our economy has changed?
I pull this out just so I won't make a mistake. This is from the Special Commission, which Erskine Bowles and Alan Simpson-Bowles Commission. And essentially what they would propose is a proposal which would raise $785 billion over the next 10 years relative to a baseline that includes permanent extension of the Bush tax cuts for middle class only. In other words, the top 1%, the taxes would go back the way they are. Permanent extension of the estate tax at 2009 levels, permanent alternative minimum tax patch. And they essentially would change 6 brackets that exist today to 3 brackets. And those brackets would be 12%, 22%, and 28%. And they would eliminate most, this is the hard part of it, most of the $1.1 trillion in annual special tax provisions in the code, except the earned income tax credit, child tax credit, standard deduction, mortgage interest deduction, which is of great interest to everybody, would be capped at $500,000, and a number of other things. It would take the corporate tax rate down to 28% at the territorial rate, which I think makes great sense to do.
So you support this package?
I would support that. I do not want to see mortgage interest deduction eliminated for the first home. You know, California, just make it more difficult in California. So
our housing prices are so different from the rest of the country.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I believe that first home, the mortgage interest and deduction, you know, a summer home, that's another story. But that first home, for a first home buyer, is really important that the mortgage be deductible. And I think it's the only way we will get real tax reform, because the devil's in the details. And if this could be part of the package, there is a year to work out the details. But if you take those 6 brackets and you compress them to 3, and you take those reductions, it still has progressivity, but everybody has to do their share. That's a key. And now there are people that don't do their share.
So what do you think the chances are we'll see changes in the way we go about our tax system federally?
I think if people think about it, you have to find a way to do it. What moves people away from it is the complexity. But if you set the basic parameters of 6 brackets going to 3 brackets, and what those brackets are, it seems to, and what the deductions are and what they're not. And that is enough to be revenue neutral or a little revenue positive, which I would hope it would be.
Simple and fair seem to be
exactly.
Key dimensions.
I think it has a lot of merit.
Yeah. In the area of not simple, an area which you've shown a lot of leadership with at the federal level and it's been very important to our state, I would be remiss if not mentioning water and water policy. We've got a lot of big issues and in California regarding how to balance the economic and environmental needs, how to make sure that the different parts of the state and different users of water have it in an environmentally sound way. Do you feel like we're making progress in that area? And what do you think?
Right.
How do you see a solution coming about for this long-term issue of water that we've had in our state that's so important to our economy?
Well, now I understand the phrase, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting, because in this state, most water disputes end up in a fight, and it's very complicated. Let me try to sort it out, but before I do, because Jeff Keitlinger's here, and he runs the Metropolitan Water District, and I have watched the Met for at least 20 years now, and it's never been better, and you all from Los Angeles can be very proud. Jeff does a super job, And most important to me is he also cares about this whole state. So he has really been helpful in the heart of various disputes with very constructive suggestions and a willingness wherever possible for the Met to participate in a solution. So if you would give him a round of applause, I would be very...
It doesn't get any better. It just doesn't.
But that's what water takes. You can't solve this issue if everybody's in their bunker. And I think we've made some progress. Now, where do we need to go in the future? First, 25 million people depend on water for drinking and for business from the Delta. It's very important that that Delta plan get done. I have put in, I happen to be chairman of the subcommittee on energy and water. It's an appropriation subcommittee. Water falls in. And so this year I wrote in codification of the date that they're supposed to have this done by, February, I think it's February 23rd, 2013, that plan gets done. Then the conveyance has to get built. And this is to be able to assure that water goes down south in a prudent way. And I think that's very important. In the meantime, I've also got 4 things in my bill. Water transfers. If you have surplus water, you shouldn't be prevented from selling that water to somebody who needs it. We ought to facilitate those transfers. So we've got a permanent extension of a bill I did 2 years ago that would make the ability to do north, south, east, west transfers on a permanent, water transfers on a permanent basis. Next, we have to pass a bond issue. The last water bond was $11.1 billion.
So you're referring to the measure
State.
that will be on the ballot
Yes,
in November?
next November.
Right, the $11.1 billion bond.
Yes.
Are you in favor of this?
It's too much.
It's too much.
And I told Governor
What would be the right
Schwarzenegger
amount?
and his people that. I've told Governor Brown and his people that. I've told Darrell Steinberg that.
What's the right
It
amount?
should be under $10 billion.
Under 9.9 billion?
Well,
or
and
what?
it should be concentrated on those things that are necessary for everybody, not a pocket full of special things for certain groups up and down the state.
Christmas tree.
That's how they
been
got
referred
it
to.
through last time. It was a Christmas tree, Bob. And I think some of us that really care really have to caution. It's hard to tell, you know, a state legislature what to do. I mean, I'm not a member. They can say mind your own business very easily. But I really believe if you had a bond at 7, 8, 9 billion and it concentrated on storage, increasing water storage. When Pat Brown built the California Water Project in the mid-60s, we were 16 million people. We now have that same water supply and we're 37 million people. We have to be able to hold water from the wet years for the dry years. And this can be done. So it calls for more water storage. And also looking at some of the big dams and seeing which are cost effective to raise the dam. I think one of them is likely to be the federal dam, which is Shasta, which if you raise it, I think the bang for the buck will be strong. Those studies are being done now. I'm not sure, but I think that. There are others, Los Vaqueros, Sites, Temperance, that are all being looked at. So if you can, in this state, we had a bumper crop of water last year. The reservoirs were at 148% of normal. We ought to be able to hold that water. The water that isn't necessary, hold it for the next year.
So you're pretty optimistic about coming up with a solution on water the next few years?
Well, if we can get agreement on a bond, that's a big step.
Next November.
If we get the Bay Conservation Development Plan done, and I believe people who are solid, who are working on it in conjunction with the state and the federal government, I think we have a very good chance to get it done. And then, as you know, the Central Valley water contractors are going to fund a conveyance. The devil's in the details there, but it should be done, and we will get it done. I think we also have to keep contamination from out of our water systems as well. I've been very worried about something like quagga mussels, which each mussel produces 1 million others. It's killed Lake Mead, and I know the Met's trying to keep it out of their system, and we're trying to keep it out of Lake Tahoe and other places as well. So I think, look, all these problems can be solved if people want to solve them.
Yeah, yeah. And this one, it sounds like there are a number of parties working on them. Let me switch to a different topic. Your leadership in Senate Intelligence Committee and just in Foreign Affairs, International Affairs. You mentioned the Arab Spring in passing a few moments ago. The events that have been occurring at a breathtaking pace in the Middle East, and there's so many that we could spend all afternoon talking about it. Does the Arab Spring make you feel more optimistic or less optimistic about the prospects for peace in the Middle East?
I would have to say I have more angst about it.
Can you tell us about that?
I will. The big nation, of course, is Egypt. 85 million people, a large military, a big country. Everybody's still unsure what will happen in Egypt. There is a group, the Muslim Brotherhood. The Brotherhood many years ago was responsible for the assassination of Sadat. There's been concern, is it really radical jihadist or is it a secular group? All the assurances are that it is now a secular group. I don't know deep down. There will be 3 elections coming up. So who gets elected, what the program is, what Egypt's position is with respect to the right of Israel to exist as a state is unknown at this stage. With Mubarak, it was known. The Mubarak government very clearly recognized Israel. The Mubarak government protected the Gaza border to prevent contraband and arms from crossing. And the Mubarak government was very helpful in solving problems in the Middle East. I don't know what the next government will do. You don't know who's president, you don't know who will be elected to the parliament, so that remains to be seen. Bashar Assad, Syria, I don't know what will happen there. That's a big question mark. If the right thing were to happen there and a democracy flower and new leadership come in, it is possible that it's very helpful because of the closeness of Syria and Iran, that Syria has an opportunity to play a role. There is some concern over Jordan. The King of Jordan has been very much an ally of this country. Again, mutually helpful toward peace settlements.
What about Iraq, where our troops are leaving now?
Our troops are leaving Iraq by the end of the year, and that is here's the good part is we're out. And we leave behind certain people, kind of a wrap-up force, and we're out. And that's a good thing. The bad part of this is that, and the reason it happened, is there's something, an agreement, a security of forces agreement that had to be signed called a SOFA, which would give our people immunity, and Maliki did not want to sign it. And therefore, we have no choice. If they don't want us there, we're not going to be there, so we leave. If the progress that's made can be sustained, what happens to other groups, Muqtada al-Sadr, the Sadrists, what happens up north, down south, all these things are important and unknown. We do know that the Revolutionary Guard of Iran has been buying businesses and moving down through Iraq, extending its tentacles, and we do believe that Iran is trying to build a nuclear weapon, which it denies. And I think there's very good evidence that, in fact, it is trying to build a nuclear warhead. Now, it's a ways away, and they also have to have a delivery vehicle for it, so there is some time, but it's a very serious thing.
So of all of the issues that come to your attention in the U.S. Intelligence arena, what do you see as the biggest threats to U.S. security and interests today?
I have to, you know, I'm limited in what I can say.
I know. But give us a sense of what are
the biggest threat to U.S. interests right today, in my view, is Iran and it's Pakistan. And Pakistan has become a major safe harbor in both North and South Waziristan for terrorist groups. And Pakistan continues to harbor the leadership of Lashkar-e-Taiba, LET. This is the group that blew up the Mumbai hotel. They continue to protect the Haqqani network, which builds improvised explosive devices and uses them across the Afghan border against us. There has been a reconciliation movement tried, and it was the Haqqani that killed the former president of Afghanistan, who was the leader of a reconciliation effort. So that speaks volumes to me. It says, we don't want peace, we don't want a settlement. We need Pakistan's help in this regard, and in my view, from what I know, Pakistan walks both sides of the street. And we fund Pakistan to the tune of about $2 billion a year. That money this year is fenced, pursuant to certain things happening. It will not be released, and I think that's very important. Hopefully, Pakistan will decide that it's important. You got to declare yourself in the war on terror. You can't walk both sides of this street, because the walk is so different on each side of the street.
Yeah. I want to take a few moments to get some questions from our audience. Yes?
If you'll just wait till the microphone's brought over to you.
There's a gentleman over here. And I have one more question I want to ask you, too. But yes.
Hi, my name is Rash.
And if I may just ask, and you know, I write questions for a living as a pollster, and so short questions and questions that are really questions as opposed to opinion are very important.
You don't think people do that, do you?
Oh, well, you've never had any experience with that, I'm
Not
sure.
much.
No. Okay.
Hi, my name is Rashid Irani from Sage Publications,
Yes.
and I'm wondering when, not if, you're going to run for the president of the U.S.
That's a short question. That's good.
Thank you. Am I going to run for re-election? Is that?
President.
Oh, no. No. That's easy.
Okay. How about on this side? Yes.
Good afternoon, Senator. Just sticking with the foreign policy arena, can you give us your thoughts on the attempted Iranian assassination of the Saudi ambassador here and whether or not the American response was proper?
I'd be happy to, sir. Yes, the American response was proper. This was real. As much as one might think, that's crazy, it was real. And 4 members of the Quds Force, which is part of the Revolutionary Guard of Iran. The Quds Force is the elite branch that does venture out and carry out certain episodes, which they have in the past, whether it's a bombing of an embassy, whether it's a killing of a consul general here or there, and so on. The Quds Force has been responsible in the past. And they were about to make a connection with somebody who had a relative in the Quds Force, had a dual citizenship here, who knew somebody in Mexico, probably one of the cartel people, that they could hire to come up and kill the Saudi ambassador, whose name is Adel al-Jabir. He happens to be a very well-liked, bright ambassador who happens to be very close, reportedly, to the royal family of Saudi Arabia. And it was a very good, exercise, because the stovepipes were down. And you had the Drug Enforcement Administration, you had the FBI, you had our signals intelligence, you had it all working. So that they have now, I've read the complaint that was filed in federal court, a very strong case. As one FBI agent told me, it's dead bang, we'll see. But it was real, and if you think about it, it's almost so bizarre that they would do this. Now, what it means, is Iran extending its power to show that it can? Is this just an aberration? I don't know, but it's a very unusual event, and it was real.
Thank you. Let's take one more question. Yes? I don't think so. Well, here it is.
Thanks. I don't believe, Senator, that most American voters understand what a cloture vote is. And in reality, it's the vote that can't be made to end a filibuster that hasn't happened in this case. Wouldn't it be politically wise, and I'm giving you first political question now, wouldn't it be politically wise for the Democrats to point that out, that each of these failures to get 60 votes is a filibuster? The public doesn't like filibusters. Wouldn't that be political? Wouldn't that bring them to an end of this?
I think we do point it out. You know, it's a form of filibuster. As you all know, the longest filibuster in history was carried out by Senator Thurmond on the floor. Now, this is when you get the microphone, when there is no unanimous consent agreement, and nobody can take the microphone away from you as long as you stand on your feet. And he was there for 24 hours. This was in the civil rights debate many years ago. Another form of filibuster can be cloture, which is either the cloture on a motion to proceed to bring a bill to the floor, or cloture, closing off debate to go to a vote. They are using cloture now, both to proceed to the floor as whether to close off debate. So it's a double whammy very often. And I regret it very much, because it does leave bad feeling. It does change a majority to a supermajority to pass anything. Even if on the final vote, a bill passes by 51 votes, it has to have had 60 votes to either close off debate or move to the floor.
Senator, I'd like to use the last couple of minutes that we have, because I'm mindful of the fact that working with our partner, they're very, very serious about ending at 1:30. I'd like to hear from you. You know, you've been a senator since '92. What do you consider some of your greatest accomplishments as senator, and what unfinished business is there that brings you to the point of thinking past 2012 as to what else you would like to do?
Well, I would say my sponsorship of the assault weapons ban, which did pass when I first came to the Senate, was in place for 10 years, was signed by President Clinton, did begin to reduce the number of assault weapons in this country. And I really remain committed that hopefully one day Americans would realize that you don't need these weapons on the streets of our country. Also, I think the Desert Protection Act, which was the largest park and wilderness bill in the history, which created Death Valley Park, Joshua Tree Park, the Mojave Preserve, and now we've got a second addition to that, which is the Mojave Monument Bill, which hopefully will be heard in the next couple of weeks and continue. I think my work to get salt ponds in San Francisco Bay turned into wetlands, the largest wetlands restoration in California history. I think saving the redwoods up in Northern California from being cut down, I think those are, and the Tahoe restoration. I think those are important environmental acts, actually. I also, in this past session, was the author of the fuel efficiency bill. And that, along with Olympia Snow, Republican, we worked together. I began this in '93, and we did different things, and we did an SUV loophole closer. Nothing got anywhere. And we introduced this 10 over 10, and that is that there would be 10 miles of increased automobile gas efficiency over 10 years. And we introduced it, and it was in the Commerce Committee, and then Ted Stevens at the time was chairman of Commerce, and he had an epiphany, and he just decided he would take the bill. And something that we had worked on for years just flew through, got enacted into law, and it's been really responsible for a lot of increased fuel efficiency in automobiles. So I'm very proud of that. And I would also say my work on intelligence, because we have brought both sides together. I work with Saxby Chambliss, who's vice chairman. We work very well. I have great respect for him. Our staffs work together. And we have been able now to do our third authorization bill when there had not been that ability for 6 years. So I think we are providing a maximum level of oversight as well as we possibly can for the 16 different intelligence agencies.
And what's on your to-do list going forward? What
well,
makes you think about the next
obviously, hopefully continuing the work on intelligence. Let me say one other thing about that. I voted to go to war in Iraq based on what's called a national intelligence estimate, which is the best estimate of all of our intelligence community. It was bad and it was wrong. Saddam Hussein did not possess weapons of mass destruction. And our Secretary of State, Colin Powell, went out before the world in the Security Council holding up a vial of what he said was from a mobile biological lab. It was not. There were no mobile biological labs. It was a terrible indictment of the intelligence community. I swore I was never going to let this happen again. I want to have the best possible reports and intelligence analyses we can. And I think we've done a lot to achieve that. Stovepipes are down, communication is up, red teaming is up. We now have all the agencies under one head, a national director of intelligence. General Petraeus has come to now head the CIA. And so I think we really are on a much better wicket, so to speak.
Thank you. Senator Feinstein, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule in Washington to be in Los Angeles with us today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.